Well, hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've been on our page today, and my coach Unia and I are going to share with you a little bit about why and how overfunctioning, like being the best mom and the best wife and doing everything so wonderfully for everyone, not only knocks you out, but actually can cause harm to other people. But before we do that, I just want to encourage you. This is my public Facebook page. So, just as a reminder for your safety, we are on my public page. Anybody can go here and watch this Facebook Live and also see your comments. So, I'd love to hear if we're live. So, just say hi and let us know that you're here. That would give me much more comfort that our technology is actually working and that we are live. So, just say hello. And what I'd like you to do is just put in the chat a gratitude. You know, the Bible tells us that in all things that we're to give thanks, not for all things, but in all things. And sometimes when we're in a negative situation, all we can see is the bad stuff. All we can see is, our marriage is failing, or our kids aren't doing well, or we're not getting, our country is having problems, or all we can see is the negative. And so I want you just to practice for just a minute taking your mind and focusing on something good, even in the bad. Not because you're happy that it's bad, but it might be something bad. But what would be one thing that you could extract, like a diamond out of a coal mine? What's one thing that you could extract that you could be grateful for right now? And put it in the chat. So Unia, you want to start? We talked about doing this ourselves. What's one thing that you can be grateful for today?
Well, today I just found a doctor for my mom. Her other doctor, who was great, had retired. So I was so thankful, and she had a lot of good reviews. So I'm looking forward to meeting her, because the last one we tried wasn't the best. And then when I went and looked, she didn't have any reviews. I don't know if that should say something. But anyways, I was very, very thankful.
Okay, yeah. So I have kind friends in here. We're grateful for truth shining in darkness. We have my children I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for, what else are we grateful for? Comfy chair that they're sitting in. And so what I'm grateful for is I am grateful for my little grandchildren who emailed me today just before I came on and said, can we come over tomorrow? Because we're bored. And I'm just grateful that my grandchildren still want to hang out with me. They're still in an age where they like being with their grandma, and I don't know how long that will last, but as long as it lasts, I'm going to take some. So I am grateful for little girls who love being with their grandma. And so I thought we'll start decorating early before Thanksgiving so that they can have something to do tomorrow, but that's what I'm grateful for. So today we're going to talk about the things that we do as women. I just wrote a blog today from a woman who said, Leslie, I don't always understand what you're meaning, because I think that being a servant and sacrificing myself for the well-being of my family and for others is what God calls me to do. And I like doing that. And I think that's the right thing. And so what's wrong with doing that? You make me feel bad when I'm all into helping everybody else. And so I answered that blog, which will be on my blog on Wednesday. But if you wonder why overfunctioning, I'm not talking about exhaust you, it can exhaust you. But I think heading into the holiday season, it might be really helpful for us to talk about why doing everything for everyone at the cost of even sacrificing your own well-being, why does that hurt them? Not just you, it hurts other people. And so Unia, any thoughts about ways that or you've seen women injure people they love, injure their kids, injure their adult parents, who might they hurt or harm by overfunctioning?
Well, let me just start with myself. As in my years of counseling, so I also wear a counseling hat too. I remember, Leslie, years ago, you had said to a group of us that were meeting together, working with people in really difficult or destructive situations, you kind of take a helper role, yeah. And you had said to us, just be careful not to do too much for them when they can do it for themselves, because that can be disempowering to them. And I really had to, ever since you said that, like really watch myself. If, in the role of, as a counselor, you can be an advocate too. So in an advocate role, is there something they could do for themselves, and then they could grow in confidence and see that, oh, I'm taking charge of this. I made this phone call. I'm on the wait list and this is what happened, versus me being the helper. And then they can start to feel like helpless. So I think helplessness is an effect of somebody who's over functioning. So I have to watch that. And I think just as a counselor, and maybe other people who are in those kind of helping roles, it can just be really like a natural thing. That's why we want to be in these helping roles. And so I just have to watch out for that in myself, just in all of my various relationships as well. And I just think about like friends of mine whose company I really enjoy and who I enjoy uh, telling my struggles to, because I notice that they do a really good job of sitting with me and listening and just saying, that's hard, you know. But I find that as I'm getting to know people, if I share a little bit of something that's hard for me, if they go right into advice giving and solving it for me, I would feel a little bit of frustration, and it can feel patronizing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's a difference between like, and I also have to watch out that I'm not that kind of friend. If somebody's saying this is so hard, like parenting or whatever, that, oh, a brilliant idea comes in my mind, right? That I'm being more mindful of, what is the reason that my friend is talking to me? And rather than being in like the solving, helping mode, because that could be frustrating for her too, when she just really maybe, wants a support, like a listening ear.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the best way I can explain it to you, and we're getting some great feed in the chat about people who are, recognizing that sometimes they're enabling other people's bad behavior by being too nice, by being over functioning, by, if you're out, buying someone's alcohol or giving money for drugs, you understand you're harming people, right? You understand that's pretty obvious. But even being a great mom can hurt your children. Like, my daughter loves, doing stuff for her kids, but yet they should be doing some of that stuff for themselves at this age. And so this is part of letting go and letting your kids fail or letting them make a mess, when they're eating and they're feeding themselves. It's much easier to feed them. It's much cleaner to make sure the spoon hits their mouth, but they're never going to learn to feed their own selves if you are always over functioning and doing it for them, or their homework, or their bathing, or their self-care and hygiene, and making their beds and cleaning up their clothes, and all the things that we as moms like to do, or we don't like to do it but we feel obligated to do it because that's what good moms do. Decorate the tree, make all the Thanksgiving dinner. My family's coming over for dinner and I'm making Thanksgiving dinner, but I'm not doing it alone. I said, you bring this. What do you want to bring? What do you want to bring? And everybody helps and everybody cleans up. It's not that mom over functions so that everyone else can just sit back and watch mom wear herself out. And I think this is where it's really important that you have this mindset that you're not being selfish or mean when you say no. Sometimes it's really good for you to say no to people, and it's good for them to say no.
Yeah, sticking with the topic of parenting, um, if a parent is over functioning for their kids, what ends up happening is that those kids will develop and expect that the world is going to serve them. And they believe that they are the ones who need to be taken care of. And also, if things aren't going their way, like they have very low frustration tolerance.
Yeah. And so we're not equipping our kids to learn to manage their disappointment if they always get what they want, or if you always help them out of a jam, or you always cover for their mistakes, or you always, are super mom and helicopter mom and coming in and rescuing them and saving them from their own figuring it out. You said this earlier, Vinia, that we are empowered when we can figure it out, when we learn the solution to our problem. And kids, for those of you who are moms, you've seen kids who's like, look, mom, I did it. Look, I got it. They're so proud of themselves. But I'm also seeing in the feed that some people at work can overfunction. Like Dazzling Dana said, people can hurt others on team projects by delegating tasks and then taking over the task, not giving the team member the opportunity to complete it. And so when we're needing to be, and I'll use it this way, when you're needing to be the hero of someone else's story, you're not playing the right role. Be the hero of your own story, but you can't be the hero of your husband's story. You can't be the hero of your children's story. You can be a helper, you can be a guide, but you can't be the hero of their story. And so often we don't think we're being selfish, but we might be being selfish because I want everyone to need me. I want to be the hero of your story because it makes me feel important, or it makes me feel valuable. And that's not a healthy biblical way to suffer, serve, and sacrifice. There's a biblical mandate for suffering, serving, and sacrificing, but not to enable someone else to stay small and independent and needy.
Mm-hmm. I think the confusion can come where you think that if you overfunction, that's loving somehow. And a definition of love that I really like, and this is not going to be a new definition for most people listening, but love is seeking someone's best interest, what's actually good for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so over-functioning leads to people being underdeveloped.
Yes.
And that is not loving for them to be underdeveloped as people.
Yeah. Yeah. Galatians says it really well. It says, bear one another's burdens. So when someone's burden is too heavy for them to carry by themselves, it's great for you to grab an end and carry it with them. If my neighbor's struggling with a big old ladder over his head, I might say, here, let me grab one end of it, right? But then it also says each should carry his own load. Mm-hmm. And so it's both and. Yes, of course, we're to help our neighbor or to help our children or to help our spouse. God calls us to be willing to do that for one another. But when we're carrying the load they should be carrying themselves, then perhaps we're trying to be a superhero. We're trying to do more for them. And then it's not enabling them to do what they should be doing for themselves. And that hurts them. It hurts their development. It hurts their growth. And one of the ladies on the chat was saying, I think I might have been doing some of that to my adult child. And now I see he's not functioning well for himself. He's not doing what he needs to do. And so what would you suggest if some people are waking up to that and saying, oh my gosh, that's the kind of mom I was, because that's what I thought was what I was supposed to do. Or maybe you were that way for your husband and you've enabled him to be a very selfish person, always demanding that you do everything for him and him never giving back. And it's not a reciprocal relationship. And so what can someone do if they're beginning to wake up and saying, wow, the good Christian, suffering, servant, sacrificial person that I've been hasn't just made me resentful and worn out, but it may have harmed people I really love. Mm-hmm. What can they do? What could they do? What would you suggest?
Yeah, and I'm seeing another question here about if you have done this with your kids and they're now 14 and 12, is it too late now? Not too late at all. Not too late. It's not even too late with, with your husband if you've been overfunctioning,
right.
Full grown. But with your kids, at that age, you can just say like, hey, you can just have a very frank conversation. Hey, you know what? I think that I've been doing you guys a disservice by doing way too much things that you guys can do. So I'm going to do things differently from now on. And these are the things that I'm expecting you to do. So it hasn't been good for you. I think it's very simple. It's an opportunity also to just show them what you do when you don't do things perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true confessions. I think we all need sometimes a reset. I think my kids have called, I'm not a helicopter mom, but I'm like everything turns into a life lesson kind of mom. It's what I do. But and my kids have told me, Mom, I don't need to learn a life lesson about every little single thing in life, and I've had to just kind of let them learn it their way. I don't have to be the sage, I can just be the mom and watch them struggle to learn what they have to learn at whatever age, because it's up to them to learn what they need to learn. And sometimes that's what they want to do. They don't want to be told.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think with parenting, just really observing all the things that you do for your kids that they could be doing for themselves, and just going through every little thing that you do and just pausing, wait, is this something they could do? And, there's a belief sometimes like this kind of baffles me sometimes when I hear like especially like Asian parents, or I won't say Asian because I'm Korean, so I'll just be more specific to Korean parents. Like, you can't do that. You can't make that dish. Like, you really believe that I cannot make this dish, So you're not going to be a part of helping me develop in making that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the people in the chat are really getting this with respect to kids, because deep down we know that our job is to help our kids not need us, right? So if you're still, feeding your child with a spoon, or you're still, brushing their teeth and they're 15 years old, anybody would say there's something wrong here. Anybody in the world would say something's really wrong here with your parenting. But the problem I think that we get really caught up in this is that we believe that it's our job with our spouse, as somehow a submissive wife, a submissive woman is a, dutiful servant of her husband. And I'm not saying we don't do that sometimes, as they might do that with us too, as a gesture of loving kindness, right? So that, of course, but a marriage that's not mutual and reciprocal in that kind of giving becomes a very unhealthy relationship. And how does it harm him when you overgive and allow him to undergive, or you overfunction and allow him to underfunction? How might that hurt that person?
The Lord has developed us, right? He has essentially developed this world in this way for us to be really beautiful versions of ourselves, which essentially is like Jesus Christ. And he came to serve. And so when we step out of the role that God has us and we go into over functioning, then it does a disservice to people around us who are supposed to be servants as well. Right. And so I've shared this like several times now. You guys might get tired of me saying this, but getting dinner ready and, setting the table or whatever. My husband, he's really, I'm sorry, my dog is shaking something right now. My camera's shaking. He's really good at doing laundry. Right. But when it's like in the kitchen, I would be over functioning in the kitchen. And all I had to say was, hey, can you help me with something? But as long as I was doing everything, he was not thinking of helping me. We were just in our roles. And so I think that can be, an opportunity for him to kind of think about, like, when I'm in the kitchen, because that's not how he was raised, right? When I'm in the kitchen, how can I be a servant to other people? And
or even just asking for help and saying, hey, I need some help. Can you do this or can you do that? Because they might not think about that. But if we're, as women, thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be doing it all, I'm not a good wife if I don't do it all. I just want to help those of you who are in unhealthy relationships, whether it's with your girlfriends, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your adult children, whether it's with your boss. When you overgive, you enable someone to undergive. Now, I'm not saying we don't overgive sometimes. There's times I overgive because someone really needs me in that moment. But if I needed them, I would expect that they would overgive too, right? Because it's a mutual and reciprocal relationship. If I'm overgiving as a pattern in a relationship and someone's not giving back, then that's when the red flag should go up and say, wow, not only am I not healthy, but I'm not fostering healthiness in them either.
Yeah. And there's another form of overfunctioning, is emotional overfunctioning. Like somebody will feel angry or somebody will feel disappointment. Better help that person better make sure that everything is okay so that they won't feel disappointed. And so you're constantly carrying the weight of that. And, they need to learn how they're going to manage their anger or their disappointment.
Right. Well, how many of us have overfunctioned in that way, in a people-pleasing kind of way? So we're so busy managing someone else's disappointment because we don't want them to feel disappointment, or we don't want them to feel angry, or we don't want them to feel upset because we won't do something or we can't do something, that we're doing what they want because we're managing our anticipation of their negative reaction to us saying no. And so not only are we overdoing it physically, we're overdoing it emotionally. And again, we're allowing them to not have to take any responsibility for managing their own disappointment or their own emotions.
Yeah. And so if somebody, tries to guilt you, if you take that guilt, you're over functioning, because that guilt and over responsibility is just not yours, right?
Right.
So only taking responsibility for the things that are actually yours, and leaving the rest, on the table.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a workshop. I'm going to be doing a workshop in December, on December 7th. I'll put a link up for it if you'd like to sign up for it, on writing a new story to your life. If you tend to be someone who is a overfunctioner and you want to, let's see, where's this? I'm trying to look for the banner here. If you're trying to change, you want to change, and you want to change you. You're not going to change them, but you want to change you. Empowered to Change is going to be starting in January, but we're starting with this workshop in December. It's completely free. It's probably going to last about an hour. And then we'll probably hang out together for another hour on a completely different site, which is private. Those of you who've done the webinars with me before know it's not on the public Facebook page. But in that way, you will be able to change your story from victim, oh, I just am over functioning and I don't know what to do and I can't help it and everybody depends on me, and if I don't do this, life will fall apart, to owner. What can I do to change? Here's another way of saying it. How can I stop getting him to be the villain and taking advantage of me, whether it's your boss, whether it's your adult child, whether it's your husband? How can I get him to stop being the villain? Is sort of victim mindset. I'm the victim, he's the villain. How can I get him to stop? Owner mindset is, what do I need to do to stop letting him victimize me? Right? What do I need to do differently so I'm not being over functioning over anymore? So I'm getting strong enough to say no without the guilt trip. What do I need to do to grow and to learn? And so those are the things that we're going to teach you, 3 shifts that you can make mentally to move out of that negative mindset of guilt and being manipulated and overwhelmed, to how can I be a strong, loving, godly woman who has the freedom to say yes and the freedom to say no, and being discerning on when is a good time to say yes and when is a good time to say no, both for me and for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm seeing in the feed that somebody said when somebody's in a crisis that it's not, it doesn't mean that they're not healthy, and that's absolutely right, And what Leslie had just said is, like, if there's a pattern in the relationship where overall you are over functioning and the other person's under functioning, that you are not being helpful to that person by stepping out of the role that God has for you, which is just do your things. And I think it's, if someone's in a time of crisis and you're helping, that's a kindness. And so having that discernment to know when something is a kindness to do something, or if you even just like a friend or a colleague, like, hey, can you help me with something? Yes. It's not like, no, I don't help anybody outside of, what I want to do. But, there's a kindness, but there's still a sense of boundaries.
And I think that's where wisdom and discernment come in. And that's what we're trying to help you grow in as women, to say, okay, yeah, I want to be a kind person. I want to be a generous person. I want to be a giving person. If those are your values and those make you feel good about you, go for it. There's plenty of people in this world who could use a generous, kind, loving person in their life. But when you're having a relationship with someone, you want to be kind, generous, and loving, of course. And you want someone to be kind, generous, and loving back to you. But when you're in a relationship with someone, even your own children, and you're kind, generous, and loving, and that tends to bite you in that they're selfish, unloving, and unkind to you, now you know that your kind, generous, and loving behaviors have enabled their selfish meter to get really big and their own kind, loving, generous meter to get dwarfed into nothing. And so I think that's what we're talking about. Is we're not talking about don't be kind, loving, and generous. I'm here on Facebook doing this with my hour for free, and I love doing this. I love being kind, loving, and generous. I want to do this, and I want to help you grow to be kind, loving, generous with good boundaries, to know when sometimes you can't do something, or it's not good for someone. It's not good for someone. So let's say you're being kind, generous, and loving to your sister, your adult sister. She's got 3 kids. She's a single mom. She's overwhelmed, and you're helping her. And then you see that she's irresponsible. She's not spending her money wisely. She's going out to the nightclubs on the weekends and spending all of her rent money, but she wants you to pay her rent because she doesn't have enough money for her rent. Was it kind, loving, and generous to enable her to continue to be irresponsible by you sacrificing money and time to help her when she's out doing things that are harmful to her and not being responsible as a mom of 3 kids to take care of her responsibilities, and she's giving it to you to take care of? Your kindness and generosity now are harming her. They're not just harming you, they're harming her and her 3 kids. If she were in a crisis, you'd be over there in a minute. But if this is a chronic issue that you're always scooping her out of her own messes, then understand this isn't kind, loving, and generous. This is called enabling dysfunction because you're too afraid to say no. And that's your work to do. She's got her own work to do, but you've got your own work to do. And I think this is the work that we talk about in having healthy relationships, because every single woman I know wants to have a good relationship with people. They just think that they have to overgive in order to get someone to like them. Like, I've got to give more in order for you to love me. I've got to get you to need me in order for me to be in your life. And that's a one down position in a relationship. You don't want to have all your friendships that way. You can have ministry relationships that way, but you don't want to have all your friendships that way.
Mm-hmm.
Even in ministry, though, Uni, I've been reading recently in the mission, like mission reports, all the things that Americans have gone into these foreign countries. We want to be the hero of their story. Yeah. We dump lots of money in there. We fix everything for them. And that's not what they wanted. They wanted to do it themselves. They wanted to learn how to plant their own seeds. They wanted to learn how to grow their own, stuff. And we just felt like we should go in and we were the heroes and we could fix everything. And we didn't fix anything and we didn't help anyone. And so it's really important that we understand that that is not our place.
That's right. There's this book called When Helping Hurts, Alleviating Poverty Without Hurting the Poor. Some of you guys might have heard that before, but that's kind of just what Leslie is talking about. That we can take a rescuer or even like a savior role and not realizing that we are engendering helplessness in the people who are receiving the help. And so being really wise, I think that as Jesus followers, we can kind of misunderstand some of what this means to be kind, be loving. We're also supposed to be wise, right? And again, that definition of loving, it's not keeping people happy. It's not making sure that people like us. That's not what loving is. Right? What is the impact of everything that I say and do? What is the impact that it's having on people around me? And so if the impact that I'm having by over functioning enables somebody to be irresponsible, enables them to be selfish, enables them to always have their way, always get their demands, then what are you actually doing in that relationship, right? Are you actually functioning in a way that God wants you to love that person in a way that's good for them?
Yeah, so you're not helping them, you're hurting them. And maybe you don't see it. Maybe you do see it now. I'm seeing a lot of, oh my gosh, wow, I didn't see it that way in the chat. And this is where I think it's so helpful to be honest and have these kind of discussions with one another, because sometimes we have our own little blind spots. And maybe we were raised with the same kind of mom who just wore herself out, making sure everybody was happy. And she ended up living, in a nursing home, and nobody came to visit her because nobody really cared about her. If she wasn't useful to them anymore, they didn't have any use for her. And you don't want to have that kind of relationship with people who you want to love you and you want to love. You want to give to them and you want them to give to you, so that it's a mutual relationship. And that's so, so important. So we don't want to, Jesus never did anything that enabled someone to stay immature. He was always pushing people to greater growth and greater maturity, even when he was kind and generous and healing people. And I think of that story in the John chapter 5, where he said to the man who had been paralyzed for 38 years, do you want to get well? Mm-hmm. Do you want to get well? Mm-hmm. That he was willing to be generous, but this man was a little bit had victim mindset. If you read the story, I can't, no one's willing to put me in the water. I've been here for 38 years and nobody's been willing to help me and do it for me. And Jesus knew that this man's mindset was more troubled than just his crippled legs. Because once he healed his crippled legs, if he was still in victim mindset, well, he was going to have to get a job. He was going to have to function face to face with people. He couldn't be a beggar anymore. Was he willing to do that? Was he willing to grow up and be a fully functioning man? Or did he want to stay a needy beggar? And I think these are the things that we don't often think about. But as we talk with one another, we can begin to see a bigger picture of helping people, even our husbands. For those of you, and don't put it in the chat because this is a public thing, don't put that kind of thing in your chat. You're my husband's a baby kind of thing in the chat. But if your husband is an immature man, if he's an immature man, and you're having all these marriage problems, and you're the one who's trying to find him the counselor, and you're the one who's dragging him to go here, and you're dragging him to go there, how are you helping him grow up? You're not. You're just enabling him to be dependent on you to fix his life. If he has no interest in fixing his own life, all your energy is going right down the tubes. You see, Jesus could fix this man's legs, but he couldn't fix his life. The man had to fix his life. And was he willing to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is going to require some discomfort on your part now. So, whereas before you used to make sure that everything was running, right? If I stop making sure that everything's running, it means that your husband might not take the meds he's supposed to take, or he's going to miss appointments. Let him miss the appointments because he is an adult, and step out of the way, and you can, as a kindness, say, hey, just a reminder, you have that appointment, and that's all that you say, right? But if you have this mindset, I have to keep reminding him, I have to make sure that I have to make sure, then he's just going to rely on you all the time to make sure he doesn't miss an appointment. Or let's say you're
in that immature position.
Or let's say you get really frustrated that he's not helping take out the garbage as frequently. Well, there's going to be a period of discomfort where you let the garbage sit there. I'm sorry, but things like that, or you let the dishes pile up. If you've said to him, can you help with the dishes, or can you take out the trash that one time? And he said yes, but he doesn't do it. It's understood that's his role. Then you just let him also, and you also have to experience the discomfort of that. And things are not going to be, for some of you, I tend to be messier. I'm okay with mess, but some of you tend to be really neat and tidy. Sometimes it will mean that your space will be less tidy if it's something that, your husband also has responsibility to clean up as well.
I have a great story. So a woman her husband had, his clothes all over the floor, and she used to pick it all up with a ton of resentment. So she was over functioning, picking up all his laundry, doing the laundry, folding it all, putting it on the bed, putting it in his drawers, whatever. And then the next day he'd wear it all and throw it on the floor, and she'd pick it all. And so here's what she said. So I'm going to give you here's how you can change the dance. Now, she didn't she didn't change his dance. She just changed her dance. He can only change his dance. So what she said is, hey, I don't want to feel resentful anymore. And I'm starting to feel really resentful about picking up all your laundry. So what I'm going to do is I would be happy to do your laundry as long as it's in the hamper. But if it doesn't make the hamper, then you're on your own. Well, of course it didn't make the hamper because she was so used to picking it up and he was so used to letting her that he was going to test that for a while, even unconsciously. And she had to live with like ankle deep clothes until one day he woke up and there was no clean clothes for him to wear. And he said, I have no clean clothes. And she said, I know, they're all over the floor. If you could get them in the hamper, I'd be happy to wash them for you. But I'm not picking them up off the floor. She didn't nag. She didn't get mad. She didn't get reactive. She just said, these are the boundaries I have. I will do this. I won't do that. And guess what? He learned to get his clothes in the hamper, or he learned to use the washing machine all by himself. Either way, it was a win-win for her because she didn't have to feel resentful toward him anymore, and she wasn't picking up his wash. He can pick up his laundry. He can do that. She was willing to give extra and do the wash, but she wasn't willing to let him act like a 3-year-old and throw his stuff on the floor. So
Mhm.
these are things that you have to decide as you're thinking about, how can I serve? And is it best for me to serve in a way, just like you wouldn't feed your husband with a spoon? You wouldn't do that. It would be disrespectful. He can feed his own self unless he was paralyzed. Then you would feed him with a spoon, right? That's not overfunctioning. It's just being kind. But if he can feed himself with a spoon or a fork, you're not going to cut his meat. You're not going to feed. He can pick up his own socks, right? He can put his own things away. He can remember his own appointments. And when you overfunction, you actually cripple him, and you let him know, hey, I have no confidence in you as an adult male to handle your own things. And that's a disrespectful thing to say to someone, even when you're trying to be kind.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw a question earlier, like 15, 20 minutes ago about how do you know when something is your responsibility? I would say one indicator is if you start to feel resentment, then you're probably doing something that's not your responsibility and you're doing it for somebody else. Do you have any other thoughts, Leslie, about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where, so if we're talking about parents to children, I think you can say once your child is capable of doing what they're supposed to do. So it's my responsibility to feed my baby until they're able to feed themselves. It's my responsibility to change their diaper until I teach them how to go in the toilet. And then it's my responsibility to wipe their butts until they know how to do that, right? You don't wipe your kid's butt when they're 10. There's something wrong there. So as soon as they're capable of doing it, that's their job now. You don't keep doing that anymore. You don't bathe a 15-year-old. So as they're capable of taking responsibility, you let that responsibility go. That's not what you do anymore. Now, when you get married, there's certain household responsibilities that I think it's helpful to have a discussion about, like what's mine, what's yours, especially if you're both working full time. But even if you're not working full time, it might be still a discussion to have. Like, my responsibility is to take care of the kids when you're not home. But when you're home, we're both parents. I'm not the only parent on the weekends. I'm not the only parent at 6 o'clock at night. We're both parents. I don't want household parenting duty 24/7, 7 days a week. That's important for you to communicate, maybe to a husband who works full time and thinks when he comes home, you're still working, but he's not. He gets to only work 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day, but you get to work 14 and 15 hours a day, right?
Mhm.
There's an imbalance of responsibility. And so I think it's important for you as a woman to speak up and say, that's not okay for me. It doesn't matter what responsibilities you take, or it does matter, but I'm not able to take all of these responsibilities.
Mhm.
And knowing what you can do and what you can't do and how you negotiate. And when he drops the ball on his responsibilities, unless the house is on fire or something like that, I think it's important for you to let him feel that consequence instead of you scooping in and rescue him out of. Just like when your kids forget their lunch. My kids forget their lunch once, I took it to school for them, for their homework. If they keep doing it, I say to them, this is your responsibility. Remember your homework or remember your lunch. I guess you're going to go hungry or you're going to get a bad grade if you don't do that, because I'm not going to keep scooping you out of that mess.
Mhm. Another thing that's coming to mind about the responsibility, what's mine and what's yours, what's coming to mind is it's my responsibility. My own happiness is my responsibility. Somebody else's happiness is their responsibility. I'm not responsible to make sure that other people are happy, right? Or that that they're not disappointed or they're not angry. Like, it's their responsibility to manage that disappointment.
Yeah.
Try to put that on you, right? Then now we're out of the territory of your own responsibility. So if they need you to be a certain way or do something in order for them to be happy, and that's like taxing you and you've gotten you all exhausted, that's an indicator.
And I think, again, we as women take that responsibility. If our kids are unhappy, oh, what can I do to make you happy? What can I do to give you a better day? If our husband's unhappy, if our husband doesn't like our no, I think we can be really respectful. I totally understand that you don't like that I said no right now. I'll give you that. And, but my answer is no. And let him figure out how he's going to handle his disappointment about your no, whether it's I don't want to have sex tonight, or I don't want to spend money, I don't want to co-sign a loan, whatever it might be where your no is, he's going to have some negative feelings about that, just like you would. If you wanted to go out on a date or you wanted to buy something for the house and he said, no, we don't have the money, you're going to feel disappointed, right? Of course you are. But that's your responsibility to manage that emotion, not for him to always give in to you so that you don't have that negative emotion. Now, most men would never think they have to do that, but a lot of women feel like they have to. Christian women feel like, oh, I have to do this so he doesn't get angry. I have to do this so he doesn't get mad. So I have to do this so he doesn't get upset. I have to do this so he doesn't feel bad about himself. This is something he needs to work out. That's his to do.
Yeah, and what we're not saying is like stop caring about how people are feeling. We're kind, we care. We're talking more about like overall patterns in relationships.
Right. And we're to care about how someone feels. We're not responsible for how someone feels. So if I say to my mom or my stepmom, who's now passed, but I had to say this once to her, hey, Mom, we're not coming home for Thanksgiving this year. So that was like driving from Pennsylvania to Chicago, and it was just too hard, and it was too cold and too long of a drive. And I said, we're not going to do it this year. And she was disappointed. And I said, I understand. It's disappointing. You want all your kids there. You want to see your grandkids. I totally get it. So you can be empathetic and caring for their feelings without feeling like you've got to fix their feelings. I can't fix her disappointment. And I trusted that she was capable of fixing her own disappointment and letting it go and understanding. But this is the difference. And this is how we want you to get healthy. We want to go to some questions. So if you have a question about this whole topic of how overfunctioning hurts people. So let's think about a story, because we're doing this webinar on change your story, change your life. So what if your belief was, if I don't make everyone in my life happy, or if they're ever upset or disappointed with me, that means I'm a failure. If that was your belief, how might your life story be played out differently than if you believed, hey, it's my responsibility to be a kind and generous person where appropriate and love someone the best I know how, but I can't manage their feelings or their life. That's their responsibility to manage. How might your life story or your relationship stories be different just by that one shift in the way you think? So we're going to be talking about this in the webinar. Change your story about how you should be, and it will change the end of the story, especially if over time, patterns and patterns and patterns of behaviors. When you believe the story that I'm only a worthwhile person if I overgive and overfunction and do what everybody wants me to do, if that's the storyline that you believe or the belief that you have about yourself, well, then you're going to create a lot of unhealthy relationships, because people who are generous givers attract needy takers if you don't have good boundaries. And if that's the kind of life you're living right now, this webinar would be especially important for you to learn the kind of thinking changes that need to shift. Even in this feed, I've seen some, oh my gosh, I never saw it that way before. And once you see it differently, now you can live out a different storyline because you're seeing it, and now you will respond differently. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat. Udi and I would be happy to stay for a little bit and answer some questions. If you haven't signed up for the December 7th webinar, you can go to leslievernick.com/join workshop. It's a workshop. There's actually an 8-page handout that you will get to fill in the blanks. It's pretty meaty, and it's really will help you understand 3 mindset shifts that you need to have. And we'll be teasing a little bit with some of the Facebook Lives here today. Today's not one of them in terms of the overfunctioning, but this is a belief that we have as women, that I'm a good person if I can really do everything for everybody. And really, maybe that's not true. Maybe you're harming more people than you think by doing everything for everybody. All right. And that your story would be very different if you were able to shift that into a different storyline. So please sign up for the webinar. It's totally free. We're going to do one at noon Eastern time and one at 7:30 Eastern time. Both of them will be live. Both of them will be with that 8-page handout. You'll also get some videos ahead of time in preparation for them, just to prime the pump, so that when you're at the webinar, you really feel ready to receive all the teaching that God might have for you on this way that you can be in 2022, that you can change the outcome of the ending of your story. Even if the characters don't change, even if the situation doesn't change, you can change as you think about it differently. So let me get to the questions. And remember, this is my public Facebook page, just so that you're safe when you ask questions. So what if you have kind of done this with your kids and they are 14 and 12, is this too late now? I think we've already answered that, Uni. I think you answered that. No, you just have to say, hey, I think I haven't done you any favors by doing your, and if they balk with that, say, hey, you wouldn't want me to still be wiping your butt at 12 and 14, would you? No, Mom, please don't say that. Well, then you won't want me to be doing this while you're 18. So you've got to learn to start doing this yourself so that when you go off to college or when you get to be a grown up, you know how to do this all by yourself. You don't need your mom. All right. Is this workshop similar information that we learn in Walking Core Strength? No, this is a completely different workshop. So it's change your story, change your life, 3 ways to move from victim mindset to owner mindset. And so we might use a little bit of those languages in Walking Core Strength, but it's a different seminar. Walking Core Strength talked about lies that you believe. And so we're talking about shifts in your mindset. Okay. So it's not the same. All right. Here's a couple more questions. My 16-year-old refuses to clean up the trash he throws on the floor. He won't put his clothes away because he says he doesn't care about that. But when I didn't hang his clothes, he blamed me when he couldn't find certain clothes. What can I do?
I'm curious what you did when he blamed you, right? Mm-hmm. Did you take the responsibility for it, or did you say, right, kind of like how Leslie's friend responded to her husband, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can even say, boy, I'm really sorry that you can't find it. Maybe next time, if you put your clothes away, they'll be where you put them. I don't know where you put them.
Yeah, you're doing him a favor by allowing him to experience the natural consequences of his actions. Mm-hmm. Right? He throws everything all over, and the natural consequence is that he'll have nothing to wear. Right? It's not clean.
Yeah. And if he throws trash on the floor in the regular house, that might be harder to live with. So it might be that you pick it up in a big laundry basket and throw it on his bedroom floor and just say, hey, I don't want this in the house. And that leads to whole other things. If there's bugs in your house or there's garbage with food in it and you have problems with, all that. And so there might be more consequences associated with that. Like, hey, I'm cutting off your iPhone until you clean off your trash. All those kind of things. You don't have access to the computer if you don't clean up your trash. This is what adults do. You're soon to be an adult. You're 16 years old. 16-year-olds clean up their trash. They don't leave it on their floor for their mother to clean up. And, just like you don't ask me to wipe your nose anymore, don't ask me to clean up your trash. This is yours to clean up, so that you're really differentiating what's mine to do and what's yours to do. And you might use some physical things that he would never want you to do for him right now. He wouldn't want you to wipe his nose. He wouldn't want you to give him a bath. He wouldn't want you to wash his hair. That's his to do now. And this is yours to do now too. It's your job to clean up your garbage. That's your job.
I also wonder what's happening relationally between that mom and the son.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, does he feel important to the mom? I don't know if there's a dad in the picture, but like his, I don't know. These kids, they also need to be seen and cared for and loved. So not enabled in terms of being irresponsible, but hey, I'm here for you. Like if you want to talk about something, I don't know. That's getting into the nitty gritty, but there's so many nuances of the relationship building. So being kind and caring and yet firm, and being firm is actually good for them, but also being kind and caring about like their emotions, like what's happening for you. Is it hard that, such and such happened at school or something happened in that relationship? It must be hard for you. And just wanted to let you know that I'm here if you ever want to talk or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really a great point, Unia, to have a lot of empathy, especially for your kids. They might be trying to say something by that trash in a very dysfunctional way, like, I don't have any power anywhere else but here, and I'll use my power inappropriately to make a mess for your life because my life is in a mess. That doesn't mean you let them any more than you would let them hit you because they're unhappy, right? But if they hit you, you might have to have a boundary, like that's not okay, but obviously you're upset about something. Do you want to talk? Right. All right. A couple other questions here. What direction would you take if it's not just over functioning due to enabling in general, but also being submissive to a spouse with a misogynist mindset?
I have to let my dog out the door. So you start.
So I think this would be really important for you to get clear on submission. So submission is a discipline of the heart that all believers are called to. Submission isn't just for wives. It's not just for women. It's for all believers. All believers are called to submit to God. All believers are called to submit to authority, and all believers are called to submit to one another. Wives are also called to submit to their husbands for the unity of the family, but it's not just women and wives who submit. Men are to submit too. So I think if you get a really clear biblical definition of submission, submission doesn't mean you have no voice, you have no choice, and your husband gets his way all the time. That's not submission, nor is it biblical headship. It's bullying, it's selfishness, it's got other terms, oppression. It's not called biblical submission. And so when Paul says submit to one another, he's not saying everybody doesn't have a choice and you all have to do what the other person asks you to do. It'd be chaos if we lived that way. And so I think it's really okay for you to say to your husband, I can't share those values and I can't submit to that because I have to submit to God first and I'm not comfortable with what you're asking me to do. Or I think you're using your position of a husband and a man to kind of bully me into doing what you want to do. And I don't like that. And I wouldn't call that biblical submission. Well, I would. Well, you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't agree. So these are ways that you can be respectful and humble, not belligerent and I don't give a rip what you think, kind of thing. We don't want to be snarky or belligerent or disrespectful back, but we can say, just like if your husband said, I think the Bible says that, we shouldn't eat meat. And you say, well, if you don't want to eat meat, I'll support that, but I don't believe the Bible teaches that for me. And I'm going to still eat meat. Paul says sometimes we're going to have different convictions on things. And so I think it's okay for you to say, I don't think the Bible teaches that for me. I don't have any conviction that that's what I'm supposed to do. And I think that's where your husband has to let you be you and him be him. And if he thinks that women are less than men, or women aren't as important as men, or women aren't as smart as men because of the misogynistic thinking, I think you might be able to say, it sounds like you're saying I'm not as worthy as you because I'm a woman, or I'm not as smart as you because I'm a woman. Is that what you're saying? And give him a chance to reflect on whether that's what he believes.
Yeah, I mean, if you pull back from that one scripture passage that says wives submit, and you look at the overall message of scripture, right? We are talking about Jesus, who came because he loves us and he is making us in his image, right? And using us as kind of ambassadors for other people. When they know us, they'll want to know God, right? Because we look like Jesus, and so how much sense would that make for us if we submit and we're enabling somebody to be selfish, to not be loving? If you look at the list of what love is in 1 Corinthians 13, love does not insist on its own way, right? Love is patient and gentle and kind, right? And so your submission is not so that evil, selfishness, wickedness can flourish. That's not what the submission is for, right? If you are married to this person, you are in that relationship to be iron sharpening iron, so that when you are in that relationship and you are a person that God has called you to be, that person necessarily has to become more like Jesus in their interaction with you, right? And we've talked about this before. If you were a slice of bread to their iron, right, then that person is not, they have nothing to rub up against and be formed more like Jesus. So that is a misapplication of that passage.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I was just talking to another Christian leader, a woman today, and the church is very much into that kind of teaching sometimes. And so I think it's hard to think for yourself, but part of what we're trying to help you do as women, as strong women, is to really search the scriptures yourself and really ask God, do you love men more than women? Is, just like white people used to think they were more important than black people or people of other races, and they used to use the Bible to support that. It's just not true. And yet they could shape things the way they wanted to oppress other people. And God hates oppression, including oppression in marriage. Anything, if you just read the first 10 Psalms, Psalms 1 through 10, you'll see how much God hates oppression. In Job chapter 5, God hates oppression. God is against the oppressor. And so when we think of headship in a misogynistic way, just like if you thought of, racism and all of that, God doesn't like that. He doesn't want that. That's not his function for relationships at all, is power over one upmanship or one below the other. We are co-heirs with Christ. And Paul was trying to right that misconception when he says, in Christ, there is no difference between Jew or Gentile, male or female, slave or free. Can you imagine how radical that was to this culture, the patriarchal, misogynistic, slave-oriented culture? He's saying, wait a minute, we're all the same. We're all equal before Christ. Don't use your power over someone. If you have power, use it to build them up. Use it to create better life for them. Don't use it to get your way and push them down. And so when you're in a marriage with someone who biblically uses those passages to get you to feel less than, understand, friend, he's not using those passages correctly any more than a slave owner used those passages correctly. It's not right. It's not God.
Any position of power has to come with humility, or else it's a deformed use of that power. And so any position of power has to be used to lift others up, or else it's a deformed use of that power, because that is Jesus Christ, God himself, the most powerful one, humbled himself. And that's just a picture of anyone who has any power not to mush people down, but to protect and lift people up. So oppression, that's not God's way. He hates it. It angers him, right? He does not like what's happening to you. It angers him.
And just like you guys, for those of you who are parents, when your kids are little, you still have a lot of power as a mom, right? You have the power to kill your kid if you wanted to. You could slap them around, look at the, news reports every day of kids being mistreated and killed by their own parents. I mean, you can misuse your power as a parent. God would hate that. He says, parents, don't misuse your power. Don't provoke your children to wrath. Don't misuse that power. And so if you were a parent, or there was I'm the father, you must obey me, get yourself in. Do you think that kind of parenting honors God? No. And that kind of husbandry or authority or headship doesn't honor God either. So don't fall for it. It's scary when someone treats you that way, for sure. Just like if someone came to my door who was a terrible policeman and had a rifle and, I'm the police, it would be frightening to be in that kind of situation. But don't for a minute think that that's God's plan. It's not his plan at all. We live in societies of oppression and power over people, but that's not God's plan. And it's not God's plan for the church, and it's not God's plan for marriage. All right. Any advice on dealing with a passive-aggressive husband who refused to provide input so as to be responsible and not let things fall? The wife shares idea. He agrees with them. When it comes to do the plan, he says he conceded to the agreement and calls the wife controlling. Well, that works, doesn't it? He can blame you and blame you for being controlling and not have to take any responsibility for a bad decision. Any thoughts about that, Unya?
I need to hear that again or read that again, because
it says her husband's passive aggressive and he refuses to provide input so that he can be jointly responsible for a decision and not let things fall. So she shares ideas. This is what we should do. This is what we should do. And he says, okay. And then when it comes to doing the plan, he says, well, he just agreed to it because she's controlling.
So where's his responsibility in that?
Well, he's not taking responsibility. That's the passive aggressive. Yeah. So he's saying she's controlling.
Oh, so you're wanting advice on how to deal with that.
How to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts? I wonder if you asked a curious question, if that might be helpful. I did a little bit of that when I was first married too. I was so afraid to share my opinion about something because I didn't want to make a mistake that I'd sort of default so that if he made the mistake, I could blame him. It was easier for me to be able to blame him than for both of us to fail. It was easier for me to say, well, I don't know. And I don't know what to do. And you decide. And then he decided. And How come you decided that? That's a bad decision. It's much easier to be a quarterback in hindsight for sure. Hindsight is always much clearer than in the moment what's the next right decision. So I'm wondering if you can be curious. Hey, we've had a pattern here and I'm not liking it because, if you want me to make the decisions, I'll make them, but then don't blame me or call me controlling. But I'm curious as to why you don't want to contribute your input. You're a smart man, you make decisions at work or whatever. And yet you default to me. And then when I don't do something you like, or it blows up in our face because I didn't choose the right thing, you call me controlling. That doesn't work for me, but help me to understand why we have this pattern. What's going on with you?
Yeah. Like, what did you mean when you said, yes, you wanted to do the X, Y, and Z? You didn't want to do it, or you did want to do it? Like, right. I'm just trying to understand. So when I was saying, let's share ideas, and you did not provide input, what did you want me to do with that? Right? So
because you call it controlling, but what did you want me to do?
Yeah. So kind of asking those kind of questions and seeing what he says. Because this sounds to me like it's like a way of getting out of, doing things.
But also to have a way to blame too.
Yeah, it's kind of
instead of saying I'm afraid to make a decision, or instead of saying I don't know what the right decision is, so you decide. But then when you decide, I can be mad at you. It's sort of like overfunctioning. Instead of I don't know how to say no, so I'm just going to overfunction, but then I'm going to be resentful. Right? So it's a very unhealthy way of doing life, and you can't change it, but you can be curious about it and kind of verbalize it.
Yeah, curious and kind of confused. Like, help me to understand what happened.
Yeah. Just if one of your children or if your spouse said, hey, help me to understand why you're so resentful. You said you were going to do Christmas, and you said you were going to do everything, and you said you were going to buy everything, and you were going to wrap everything, and you were going to cook everything. And now you're all crabby about that. Help me to understand why you're doing that. I felt like I had to, I didn't have any, you did have choices. We told you didn't have to do that. We didn't have to have a Norman Rockwell Christmas. That was sort of like a conversation at my house once. So, I think it's helpful that, put it out there and see if they can reflect and begin to own, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? Why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. And someone's saying curious questions don't seem to work because he talks over me.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when I'm having a conversation with you, we're not really having a conversation. You don't want to listen to what I have to say. That's kind of the story I'm telling myself. Is that right? So that would be a curious question about him over talking you. Right. And again, they don't work with everybody. And so we're trying to give you some tools, but understand that there's a lot of people who don't want to have a conversation. So we see it politically right now. I would love for us to be able to have a conversation, Republicans and Democrats, and really have a conversation about not who's right and who's wrong, but how can we best serve our country? How can we best educate our children? How can we best keep our country safe from people who are out to harm it with looters and all those other kind of things? But we can't have those conversations because the climate and the mindset right now is we have to demonize people who don't think like we do. We can't learn from them. We have to make them into bad guys.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a relationship with someone like that they can't listen to you and learn from you and have a healthy conversation, it doesn't matter what you start with, it's still going to end up in the same place. And Jesus experienced that too. So don't beat yourself up. It's helpful to learn these skills, but they don't work with everybody. All right. You mentioned John before, but I can't recall the chapter or verse. It just resonated with the core of my being. It's John chapter 5. It's the story of the man who was paralyzed for 38 years. About did he want to be helped? Could you possibly go over that a little bit more? How do we step back from helping well, enabling after years of overfunctioning when the person is quick to anger? Thank you so much. So many women, I'll just say it this way, just read the story for yourself. And it's a crazy question. Why wouldn't somebody want to be well? Why wouldn't somebody? Because there's a payoff for staying sick. There's a payoff. He got to stay immature. He got to stay beggar. He didn't have to work. There was a payoff for him there's a payoff for you to stay overfunctioning, right? You get to be the hero. You get to do everything the right one. You get to be self-righteous. There's a payoff for staying unhealthy. And so Jesus was wise in asking this man, do you want to be well? Are you willing to give up your payoff, right? In order to get healthy and strong. You've got some work to do. And so he's respectful. And so many women will say to me, well, God can do anything. He can change my husband. He never changes anybody without asking him if they want to be changed. Do you want to be well? And if you do, and you're recognizing some of the dysfunction in your own life, I would encourage you to come to this webinar. that, or this workshop that we're doing, that you would say, I can't fix him, but I got to fix me. I've got to get my head on straight. I want to mature. I want to be as healthy as I can so that I can be the best mom, grandma, wife, person, friend, woman, Christian I can be. And if he doesn't want that, I can't make him, but I want that.
Yeah, and the best version of a why for yourself is, the version that has limitations and knows it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm tired. I need rest in order for me to be function well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm feeling a little run down. I better say no to this thing or to helping you right now. Yeah.
And even Jesus did that in his humanity. He modeled to us.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I need to go to a quiet place. I've got to get up early to pray. I've got to take care of me, guys. I'm going to bed, guys. It's Mark chapter 1. He was tired. He ministered all day long and they were still coming at him. And he said, guys, got to stop my Facebook Live now. I can't do this anymore. I got to go to bed, right? Whatever he was doing, he had boundaries to that. He was modeling for us because he was living inside of a human body, that my body is tired. My spirit is weary. I need to go by myself. I'm tired of talking. And that's okay for you to recognize that too.
And he expressed needs, and he, said when he needed help, like when he was hanging on that cross, he said, I thirst, right? That was like asking for help, right? So it's okay for you to recognize first that you are thirsty and then say, I'm thirsty.
Yeah. I'm not the hero all the time. I can't overfunction all the time. Even Jesus, who was Jesus and God, couldn't. And he didn't feel any shame at that at all. He just accepted the reality of his limitations. All right. What about a 15-year-old who doesn't brush their teeth? I want to teach life skills, but he hates it and he wants his independence. Shall I wait till he gets cavities? Maybe. If by 15 he hasn't learned a habit of brushing his teeth. So I think usually, you brush your kids' teeth pretty regularly until they begin to develop a habit where they feel their own teeth feel like furs on them, or they smell their own body as stinky and they take a shower, or they realize their own head looks like a mess and comb their hair. And usually around 15, that's when it starts to matter, 12 to 15, when they start being interested in their peers and what their peers think. So I think you might have to say, hey, these are hygiene habits that are important for your long-term well-being, and they're yours now to take care of. And if you want to go to school stinking and having bad breath and looking like you have fur on your teeth, well, then that's your decision.
Yeah, and just kind of asking them, like, are you okay with that if someone's talking to you and you have bad breath? So are you okay with that? And maybe like not nagging them about it, but really just having like a curiosity question and just sitting down and, and I'm just kind of concerned for you that, you might be walking around with bad breath or,
or stuff in between your teeth that looks gross. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And just say, and if he is okay with that and doesn't care, I'd assess for something more serious than lack of toothbrushing, because when you don't care about yourself, that's more of a depression. So if he's been somewhat normal in caring for himself and this is something new, I would be more concerned about the bigger picture. Like, why is he not caring about his peers? Why is he not caring about how he looks at this age? Most boys at 15 do care somewhat.
Yeah. And, whenever depression is in the mix, you always have to think about levels of stress, and trauma. Is there something else that's happening that's like stressful? Because I'll just say really quickly, there's where you feel regulated and you're connected with other people. And then higher up in that, you go more dysregulated, where you get the anxiety, panic, right? Some of that is functional. Some of it gets, to where it's hard to manage. And then actually the highest level of distress is depression, where there's so much stress in your body that your body has to shut that down in order to be able to function. So just the essential functions in your body, like brain, heart rate, or your heartbeat, right? But energy to do anything, motivation, interest can all go down. And that just means there's way too much stress happening in your life or unresolved trauma.
Yeah, so I would just really do an assessment. Is this something recent where he was, taking care of himself and now he's deteriorated? Or is this something that you just, struggling with his whole entire life, that he's not taken responsibility for his own self-care? And, I think, a really neat diagram, not neat, but this is the diagram that I would draw for my kids, is that, and maybe it'd be helpful for you. So I'll draw it out for you. So I give him this big L, and I would say, this has to do with responsibility and privilege. Okay, so responsibility and privilege. So when a child is 0, they don't really have any privilege and they don't have any responsibility, right? They just don't have any because you're completely dependent on me, right? But as your child begins to they start to get older, around 10, 11, they want some privileges. Like, I want to be able to watch TV. I want to be able to go to my friend's house. And they also have some responsibilities. They have to do their own homework. They have to brush their teeth. They have to make their bed, whatever. And so I say to my kids, hey, if you want privileges, which you're going to want at 15 or 16 or 17, you're going to want to drive the car. You're going to want to have an iPhone. You're going to want to, do certain things that are part of being an adult. I got to see you functioning like an adult up here in the responsibility arena, because it goes together. So if you want those privileges that come with adulthood, because when you were a child, when you were 1, 2, 3, 4, you didn't have any privileges. I took care of all of your benefits, whatever they were. But if you want to start making your own decisions and you want to start going places and you want to start having, those privileges, then you have to show me that you're taking those responsibilities, because they go together. And that might help your kid understand. They might not like it, but because they feel, and again, you're over functioning, entitled them to believe that I'm entitled to my privileges without any responsibilities. And those of you who are married to destructive husbands, maybe their moms overfunction too, because they believe I'm entitled to all the perks of marriage. I'm entitled to you being nice to me, and you being respectful to me, and you being submissive to me, and you having sex with me, and you taking care of me. And I can be like a bum and you still owe me that. And that doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. And so the sooner your kid connects the dots between responsibility and privilege, the healthier they will be. All right. I think there's one more question. What about the verse that says a man is the head of the wife? What does that mean? Men have been sold a rotten bill of goods, which has ruined so many marriages, in my opinion. Poor guys are confused. Any thoughts about that, Unia?
I was waiting to hear your response. Man,
I'm not going to really get into it. I think you, by the way you answer the question, you already know what you think about that. So I think, there's a controversy of whether that means a man is the head of so my head is on top of my body. Does that mean that if my body, I can do without my body and my head can just function all by itself? No. Right? It's not true. My body informs my head informs my body. We work together. And so I don't think it means that the head is more important any more than my eyes are more important than my liver. My liver is far more important. I can live without my eyes. I can't live without my liver. So I don't think it means that. And so whatever, and theologians are debating about that right now, whether that means source or whether that means something else. It's debatable. But what it doesn't mean is that one has all the power and the other has no power. What it doesn't mean is that one is the master and the other is the slave. It doesn't mean that.
I think also in Western society, we over-privilege the head, right? The knowledge, right? The body is, someone said, kind of in a funny way, that it's just a vehicle to move the head from room to room, right? And so we just I think, therefore I am, it's like that has all the value, and that's and then the body just kind of loses out. But as we're learning now more about trauma and how we can regulate and be connected with other people, an interesting factoid is that when it comes to messages of safety, or whether assessing a situation, 80% of the communication flows from the body to the brain, and 20% from the brain to the rest of the body. So it's like this interdependent thing. And then there is also the heart and the gut also has um, uh, cells that are like the ones in the brain.
Right. And they're all communicating with each other. One isn't just bossing, like the head isn't just bossing the body. Like when sometimes your head can boss your body, like get out of bed, right? And other times your body is saying, we're not getting out of bed because we're too sick. And it doesn't matter what you tell yourself, you can't get out of bed because your body won't work. And so it's not the idea that the head means I get to make all the decisions in the body. It's like like I said, just an appendage to the head. It's not true.
Right. Like men are only, right? Men can think, women cannot. That's not what that means.
Right.
Yeah, because even the heart, you can just say like, I just knew it. I had a gut feeling. It's because you know what, your gut and your heart has those cells as well. So.
Well, and there's the rational way of knowing, which is very Western, I think, therefore I am. But there's the intuitive way of knowing. And the intuitive way of knowing is not your emotions, ladies. It's not emotional knowing, because sometimes we can feel afraid and think, oh, that's my intuition. That's not intuition. That's just your emotions. Your intuition is your gut. Sometimes if you practice this before the next time we get on, we're going to be on Facebook Live a couple times this week and next in light of the webinar. But next time you don't know the answer to something and you're trying to think of the answer, or what to do, what's the next right thing. If you try to find that answer here, it might feel very anxiety producing and you're not sure, confusing. Put your hand on your belly, or put one hand on your belly and one hand on your heart and say, what's the next right thing? And you'll know that's more intuition. You'll know what the next right thing is. You'll know what to do. And so, or you'll know what's right. You'll just know and trust that, because God has given the feminine more access to that part, and the masculine more access to this part. But the image of God is what? It's both male and female. He created them. And so masculine and feminine are both created in the image of God. And so when we mature, women may need to get a little bit more masculine in terms of their understanding their rational mind, and men need to learn to get more in touch with their intuition and learn to be more have some of the gentler qualities of the spirit in order for them to be more fully mature. But we need both.
Yeah, and I think, just that question really sticks out. We've already talked about it, but how do you know what's your responsibility and what's another person's responsibility? I think women, we are just in this culture just encouraged to always take care of other people. Harriet Lerner had said emotional service stations, right? So not really stopping to think like, what is okay for me? What works for me? How does it feel? Like we were saying, one hand on the heart, one hand on the body, and just tuning in to your body. What does my gut instinct tell me? And that's a part of being a person. And that's how you come out of, over functioning and actually accidentally doing harm to other people, because you're tuning into yourself and being connected that way.
Yeah. And I think just in light of what we're saying in closing, sometimes we're very tuned into other people, but we're not tuned into ourselves.
Yeah.
So we can read somebody else's bad mood. We can tell what they're feeling. We're very tuned in. We're attuned to, as moms, we're attuned to our babies. We're very attuned to what other people, their vibes and what they need from us. But we're not very attuned to our own self. And so I would just encourage you to spend some time attuning to yourself, and what do you need, and what is it that you want, and what are you hungry for? And I'm not saying we always get that, but knowing that is part of your maturity.
Yeah, when you take good care of yourself, you're able to, take care of other people.
Yeah. Well, there's one more question that I'm going to do real quick because we're way over time. But what if a 16-year-old believes his own truth, similar to his father, and won't listen or validate anything you have to say regarding hygiene or input? I think we've sort of answered that one with the other one. I think sometimes, so the Bible says that a wise person listens to advice, and a fool refuses to listen or learn. So your son is on the fool's track, and that doesn't mean he won't get off of it someday, but usually the fool's track requires tough consequences. So if someone doesn't listen to their teachers, if someone refuses instruction, then the next step of learning is the consequences of our foolishness, right? That's why we don't want to step in and be over functioning, because we sometimes then negate the pain of those consequences because we feel sorry for someone. So if we try to teach our kid, for example, to manage money, to manage money, to manage money, to manage money, we go through all those skills and we show them how to do their checkbook and teach them how to save and all that, and they refuse to listen and they spend their money as fast as they get it, and then they're 18 and they buy a car and they're in debt and they can't pay the payment, and they say, Mom, can you pay my payment because I spent all my money? No. The hard lesson of losing your car, and I wouldn't say this in my mouth, but the hard lesson of losing your car may help you learn to manage your money better. If I just bail you out of that by being a nice mom and loving mom and giving mom and sacrificial mom, I'm not helping you, because now you didn't learn with words, you need to learn with consequences. And that's why in destructive marriages, when churches tell you just forgive and forget and the consequences aren't, biblical, consequences are biblical. You sow what you reap, so that you learn not to sow weeds if you want to eat crops, right? And so if you sow weeds, you get weeds. And that's a powerful lesson if you're not going to listen to the farmer telling you don't sow those seeds.
Yeah. And I just want to add that, for your son, to really pray for him. There's something happening there in your family where whatever your husband is living by, something is happening that your son is also taking on that same attitude. And so I would really, and maybe you already are, and that's great. Just commit that to prayer, that, Lord, help him not to take people for granted, help him to be a thankful person, help him to know you and know your heart, and be known by you, help him to know that he's loved by you. Those kind of things, like to kind of break down strongholds that might be happening in your family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I see lots more questions in the feed, and we don't have the time to finish answering them, but we're going to do all kinds of Facebook Lives this week. I'm going to do another one. Let me just look and tell you, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Let me get to it, and I'll tell you what it's on. Elise is going to do it with me if she's not sick. She's a little sick today, so she may end up not being there, but tomorrow morning I'm doing a Facebook Live at noon Eastern time, and your beliefs. So we tackled a specific belief in that, I should be the giving, suffering, sacrificial lamb here for my family. And we've seen that belief maybe be a lie. Maybe it's not true. Maybe you're actually causing more harm. Maybe you're actually causing more harm to others and your relationships by being the savior of their story. So we're going to talk in general now how other beliefs may hinder you from living to your fullness and impacting your life. Like, I'll just give you a teaser. I can't do it. That's a belief that we have about ourselves. I'm not smart enough. I'll never be able to handle that. We tell ourselves certain things that we believe, but they may not be true. And so between tonight and tomorrow at noon, when I'm here again with Elise, I want you to think of the things just in that one sentence. I can't. How many times have you learned you did, that you had this belief that limited your options? If I can't do this, then I'm not even going to try that, right? I'm just going to go here. But maybe I can. And if I can, how would that change the outcome of the story? So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow at noon. So we'll see you again here tomorrow at noon Eastern time to do another Facebook Live. Thanks, Unia. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Leslie. Good being here with you all.
All right. Good night. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.